Right, we need to talk about Britain's asylum system, or as it's more accurately known, the how to stay in Britain forever, no matter what you've done system. Judges have allowed criminals to stay in Britain because they're paedophiles or terrorists or druggies. Just to be clear, the judges let them stay because they've committed these crimes, not despite them. The asylum seekers say, "You can't send me back, I'll be discriminated against because I've committed terrible crimes." And instead of saying, "Well, you should have thought about that before you committed these crimes. My priority is the safety of the British people." Our asylum judges say, "Oh, well, that's okay, why don't you stay in Britain instead and have free everything and carry on committing crime?" Judges have also let men stay in the country because they say they're LGBTQ, despite being convicted of forcing themselves on women. And judges have ruled that asylum seekers are children when they've got receding hairlines and beards, so they get placed with actual children. I mean, that's an insane safety risk. Judges also admit to overlooking lying and fake weddings. The whole system seems to work against the interests of British people, most of whom probably think that Britain already has enough paedophiles and terrorists. The whole system has been captured by activists. There's a network of human rights lawyers and NGOs who know how to work the system and coach their clients on what to say, whether that's to pretend they're Christian or have a transgender kid, or to suddenly and conveniently come out as gay when they've just been released from prison for sexually assaulting a woman. The judges rubber stamp the most egregious claims, even when they admit that they know they're being lied to. And at every step of the way, we're paying for it. We pay for the asylum seekers, we pay for their lawyers, we pay for the Home Office lawyers trying to remove them, we pay for the judges, we pay for the court system, we even pay compensation to illegal migrant criminals for having the temerity to dare to enforce the law against them. And with asylum claims rocketing to over 100,000 a year while deportations plummet, the system needs urgent reform in every sense of the word. And don't worry, I know how to fix it. But first, let's look at some of the most ridiculous rulings by our asylum judges. Let's start with the nonsense. A Sri Lankan man convicted of abusing 3 boys had a judge cancel his deportation after a 14-year legal battle to remove him. The man is known only as PG. Well, I guess with the charges he's been found guilty of, he's not going to be called 18 plus, and he arrived in the UK on a student visa in 2008. He was arrested a couple of years later and given a 4-year prison sentence. He then applied for asylum by claiming that his life would be at risk were he to return to Sri Lanka because he's gay. So he's been allowed to stay in the UK, where he's presumably filled his time by applying to be a BBC newsreader. This is despite him being described in court as a danger to the community. Why is it impossible to send him back? Because he'd be the one in danger, but it's okay to keep him in the UK where he's a clear danger to British kids. Another asylum-seeking nonce from Pakistan avoided deportation because a judge said it would be unduly harsh for his children to be without their father. Unduly harsh on his kids? Oh yeah, how are they going to cope without noncy pops tucking them in at night? Usually, judges will see this sort of crime as a reason for someone not to see their kids, but not this time. This Pakistani man, who's been granted anonymity by the court, came to Britain in 2018, and a couple of years later he targeted prepubescent girls aged as young as 12. Britain has become a magnet for Pakistan's nonce community, as they know that our left-wing establishment will enable their crimes and cover up for them, and even when they're caught, like this guy was, the punishments are incredibly lenient. Luckily, in this case, the man's targets were in fact decoys in an undercover police operation. I mean, you've got to wonder why nobody in his position has used the defence of having a fetish for talking to undercover police officers, and this being the only way to meet them. Another man, a convicted Zimbabwean paedophile who served more than 5 years in prison in Britain, was allowed to stay in this country by an asylum judge because he would face hostility because of his crimes if he was deported back to his home country. Yes, he should face hostility because of his crimes. He should face hostility here. He should be begging to be returned to Zimbabwe because Britain is so hostile to him. What on earth is wrong with Britain's asylum system that it deliberately harbours paedophiles? The man is autistic and deaf, which Judge Sarah Pinder accepted that meant he lacked the social skills that would enable him to defuse hostility against him. It also probably makes it harder for him to sneak up on his victims. Honestly, deaf, autistic Zimbabwean and a paedophile? I think that's an automatic Arts Council grant right there. You've got to wonder at the suitability of a judge who, seeing a case like this, thinks, "Oh, won't somebody please think about the poor paedophile?" These cases show that our asylum system actually incentivizes illegal migrants to become nonces as it prevents them from being deported. Rather than counting against their claim, our country is in the insane position of rewarding paedophilia, and some asylum seekers straight up lie to stay in the country. Ghanaian woman Francisca Boateng was granted the right to stay in the UK after staging a wedding she didn't even attend. She She won an appeal to stay after claiming that her proxy marriage to a German citizen living in Britain qualified her to remain in the country. And when I say German citizen, he's one of the new Germans. He's got the classic Bavarian name of Fatau Sulaihu. They arranged a wedding in Ghana in 2018 that neither of them attended. They got divorced in 2022, which conveniently meant that she was entitled to claim UK residency under Brexit's EU settlement scheme, as the marriage had lasted 3 years. Another African woman was allowed to stay in Britain because she joined a terrorist group. She tried and failed 8 times to get asylum here, claiming all sorts of reasons, including being a victim of human trafficking, probably anything that her lawyer or NGO told her might be worth a shot. She was finally granted the right to stay in the UK after joining a terrorist group and saying she couldn't be sent back as she'd be persecuted for being a terrorist. Upper Tribunal Judge Gemma Loughran said that the asylum seekers' involvement with the separatist group Indigenous People of Biafra meant the 49-year-old Nigerian woman had a well-founded fear of persecution under human rights laws and gave her the right to stay, even though the judge acknowledged that the woman wasn't even a real member of the terror group and had only become involved in order to create a claim for asylum. Never mind the fact that when members of terrorist groups are put in jail, it's not persecution, it's what should actually fucking happen. You'd think a sensible asylum system would filter out terrorists and other dangers to society, but instead we encourage them. Our asylum system isn't just incentivizing people to be nonces, but also to be terrorists. Oh, just what this country needs. Pedo-terrorists. And this isn't even the most deranged incentive in the system. An asylum seeker from Sudan has been declared to be officially a child by immigration judges despite having a receding hairline and facial hair, and government assessors insisting that he's 23. The man arrived in the UK on a small boat across the channel in September 2023 after travelling through Libya, Tunisia, Italy and France, and claimed to be 16 years old. However, government assessors said he was much older as he had a receding hairline, had been shaving for a while, with thick facial hair, a broad chest, forehead wrinkles and crow's feet. Geez, sounds like he maybe just had a tough paper round in Khartoum. His legal team insisted that he's just a 16-year-old child, and the judges agreed, ruling in the asylum seeker's favour and ordering that previous age assessments be quashed. The judges know better than the experts, apparently. In December 2023, a judge ordered that he be moved to a children's accommodation while legal proceedings were carried out. This is where it gets serious. Child asylum seekers are placed with other children in children's homes and schools. You're going to have classrooms with teenage British girls that then have grown men from alien, violent, misogynistic cultures just airdropped into them, sitting there pretending to be school kids like a really sinister remake of 21 Jump Street. Having adults pretend to be high school kids was bad enough when they filmed Grease or Happy Days or Beverly Hills 90210, but in real life, in Britain, with its history of sex crimes committed by men from overseas against children, this is criminal. The council that challenged the asylum decisions were also told to pay £30,000 towards the man's legal costs. This is to dissuade other councils from challenging asylum seekers who claim to be children. The case was overseen by Judge Hugo Norton-Taylor, who oversaw a controversial finding where Palestinian refugees were allowed to come to Britain using rules meant for Ukrainians, and Judge Sarah Pinder, who's been behind some of the other questionable decisions in this video. Incredibly, Labour are now watering down asylum rules to do away with scientific age testing, making it easier for grown men to pretend to be children. The message that these judges and our government are putting out is that grown men should say that they're children. Even if assessors say that they're grown men, the judges will overrule the decision and they'll be allowed to stay and they'll be placed in classrooms with children. I mean, geez, after that, the drug dealers seem kind of quaint. Jamaican drug dealer Sean Rickford McLeod arrived in the UK in 2000 but was jailed after supplying Class A drugs. He avoided deportation after promising he'll only smoke cannabis and not sell it, and the judge went along with him. I mean, smoking it is also illegal. This is like a burglar promising to only steal toasters. But it was enough for Judge David Brannan, who decided that the deportation would be unduly harsh and believed that he genuinely wants to avoid reoffending so he can care for his children, because nothing's better for young kids than a drug-using dad who I'm sure is going to be a steady and permanent fixture of their lives. Another Jamaican drug dealer avoided deportation because he's got a transgender child and claims to be the only person the child can talk to about their gender transition. What, in Britain? Every second person on the street here is a state-funded gender communist eager to talk to children about transitioning, and a Jamaican drug-dealing dad is the only person this kid can talk to. I don't know if the Jamaican drug-dealing dads that I've met personally are representative of that specific demographic, but they didn't seem the most sympathetic people to progressive gender ideology and child transitioning. Although since this dad has been convicted of dealing crack and heroin, I suppose at least he'll be able to help his kid find a vein for the hormone injections. Judge Sarah Pinder found that this career criminal's mixed-race children would have unmet emotional needs linked to not just the loss of a parent, but to the loss of the parent who represents half of their cultural identity. It was therefore judged unduly harsh on them to deport this dad, even though, get this, the kids witnessed him beating their mother. But he took breaks in between smashing her face in to discuss gender transitioning with the kids, so hey, let's let him stay. And apparently he's not even around. The judge found that his parental relationship with the children was limited and he was separated from the mother, who had no difficulty caring for them while he was in prison. So we can send him back. I get the impression that gender bollocks is just something any immigration lawyer can now throw in as a joker card. This ruling means that asylum seekers now have an incentive to transition their kids. We're going to see Jamaican dads overtaking Hollywood celebrities as the main parents of trans kids. But it's not just trans kids that can help. Saying that you're LGBTQ is like a magic spell to make any British judge cancel your deportation. A 41-year-old Jamaican man convicted of raping a woman in the UK successfully avoided deportation by arguing that he was bisexual and it would make him a target for persecution if he was sent back to Jamaica, even though there was no evidence of him actually being bisexual. And if he was attacked for being LGBTQ, he could surely just show his attackers his conviction and they'd be impressed. He received a 7-year prison sentence for attacking a woman as she slept, but excused his actions because he was not aware that having sex with a sleeping woman is wrong. Man, this keeps coming up as an excuse in these cases. Oh, I didn't know that this terrible thing that I did that's obviously wrong was wrong. I don't know, maybe we should prioritise the safety of British citizens and not allow in so many people from alien, misogynistic and violent cultures. Asylum seekers who claim to be LGBTQ can get help to convince judges from special advisors such as Asifa Lahore, a transgender Muslim drag queen, geez, somebody wants to get cast in an advert, who is described as Britain's first out Muslim drag queen. I'm not sure exactly how a drag queen could be anything other than out. I mean, the makeup, the wigs and the sparkly ball gown kind of gives it away. Even if you tone it down, your mates are going to be like, Barry, are you wearing sequins? According to court documents, Asifa gave evidence in 10 or 12 immigration appeals in just 1 year, testifying on behalf of various Muslims to prove to the judges that they're authentically gay. Don't worry, I don't have any Polaroids, so they couldn't be returned to their home countries because they'd face oppression. I don't know what the credentials are that are used to test the gayness, but I bet the methodology isn't as robust as the one that I'd use, which involves my mate known as 16-inch Leroy and zero lube. But this should have alarm bells ringing. You think the person just organically happened to be close friends with 12 men who happened to apply for asylum and needed some way to show that they're gay? There's something about this that smells very fishy, which is kind of ironic when you think about it. There's been a huge increase in the number of asylum seekers who get to stay in Britain because they say that they're LGBTQ. In 2019, just over 400 people did this, but in 2024, that number had risen to 2,133. When people are allowed to game the system by pretending to be gay or Christian, it can have tragic consequences. Remember the case of Abdul Shakur Izidi, who destroyed a woman's life by throwing a corrosive substance in her face? He was a Muslim who won asylum in 2020 after proving his conversion to Christianity, but when he died, his friends and his family demanded a Muslim burial, so it doesn't sound like he was actually Christian. And even murder gets overlooked by our asylum judges. A Turkish man known only as KD entered Britain illegally with his wife in 2001 and applied for political asylum, which was turned down. Was he sent back to Turkey? Of course not. Rules and laws are just for British people. He stayed in Britain running a kebab shop until one night he caught his wife chatting to another man online. Furious about this and the fact that his wife was wearing a low-cut top, he stabbed her 10 times and then phoned friends to confess. He was jailed for 12 years and on release he should have been deported. His parole board even said he had a medium to high risk of serious harm to adults, but his legal team said that if he was sent back to Turkey, he'd be at risk of revenge attacks from his wife's family. Well, yeah, that's one of of the reasons you shouldn't kill people. People might want revenge, and thank God they do, because the law doesn't seem to be providing much of a deterrent. But despite the clear risk this murderer continues to pose to British people, his asylum judge, Jonathan Perkins, decided that he wouldn't be safe if he was sent back to Turkey, so let him stay. The message this judge is sending to men from the Islamic world is, if you want to kill your wife, kill her after illegally entering Britain, and the act of murder will actually protect you from being returned to your home country. Our asylum system is willfully putting British people in danger and protecting violent murderers. It's absolutely bananas. Our asylum judges don't just protect criminals from deportation, they protect the people bringing in the criminals. An Albanian criminal who smuggled people into Britain to work for a drugs cartel was allowed to remain in the UK after a judge ruled that he had become a valuable member of society, even though the judge himself admitted he had no objective evidence to justify this verdict. Christian Agoli, a 36-year-old Albanian, was imprisoned for 3 years and 3 months in 2023 for smuggling Albanians into the UK to work on illegal cannabis farms. After his conviction, the Home Office issued a deportation order, which Agoli challenged under the ECHR, claiming it would disrupt his family life with his Romanian wife, who had never lived in Albania and couldn't speak the language. An immigration tribunal judge sided with him, ruling that deportation would be unduly harsh on his wife. The judge declared Agoli to be a valuable member of society with a low risk of reoffending, despite no concrete evidence like probation reports or rehabilitation efforts to back this up. The judge just relied on Agoli's and his wife's word. Oh, there's nobody more trustworthy than a convicted drug criminal. Although to be fair, Agoli does take his family responsibilities seriously. He even smuggled a close relative into the UK. But our judiciary don't just consistently rule in the favour of illegal immigrants who break our laws, they reward them with huge payouts for compensation for us breaching their human rights. Nadra Tabassum Almas came to Britain from Pakistan on a student visa and overstayed it, which is a criminal offence. Because of this, she was detained at Yarl's Wood, an immigration residential centre for women and families. Incredibly, she sued the UK government for unlawful detention and won her case. But it doesn't end there. She was granted refugee status in 2021 after claiming to be a Christian and saying she couldn't possibly be sent back to Pakistan because her life would be in danger. But during the 2 years and 9 months she waited for a decision, she was placed under conditions that she said made her feel like a criminal and breached her right to family life under the Human Rights Act. Made her feel like a criminal? She was a criminal. She overstayed her visa. It's a crime. But a judge ruled that the British government had to pay her £130,000 in damages and costs, and it all came from your taxes, unless you're watching this in another country. The judges are sending a message to everyone around the world. Come to Britain, break the law, we'll protect you. Just say that you're gay or you're Christian or your kid doesn't like foreign chicken nuggets or whatever. And if the government dare have the temerity to try and enforce any sort of control in the system, we'll make sure they have to give you loads of money. None of this is accidental. The purpose of a system is what the system does. Our government, Home Office and criminal justice system have been captured by progressive activists who want to abolish whiteness, abolish the nation state and institute one world communist government. They see multiculturalism and diversity as a strength, so these different cultures where women have no rights, gay people are brutalised, children are targeted, these are all welcomed in. This is reflected in the asylum system. Here you can see how the number of people claiming asylum is increasing year on year, with more than 108,000 people applying for asylum in Britain last year. That's more than double the number in 2021, and the largest figure since records began in 1979. As more people see the asylum system as an easy way to get into Britain, more people apply. And as the number of people applying rockets, the number of applications waved through is shooting up even higher, as this chart shows, increasing from under 20% in 2004 to over 40% in recent years. And that rises to nearly 100% for people from places like Syria, Sudan and Eritrea. So people entering Britain have an enormous incentive to rip up their passports and pretend to be from these countries. Even for asylum seekers from safe countries like Pakistan, more than half get waved through. With asylum applications rocketing, you'd expect deportations to be increasing as well. Instead, deportations are plummeting. The message from our asylum system is, if you can get to Britain, you're staying. Instead of dealing with the issue, our leaders tiptoe around and try to rebrand illegal immigrants as irregular arrivals, which is sort of like rebranding a burglar as an irregular housemate. But this is dangerous, not just because it leads to dangerous criminals being allowed into the country. It's destroying faith in our institutions and in our democracy. People are sick of our institutions being politicised. The judiciary stymie any attempt by our elected leaders to fulfil their election pledges to restrict immigration. People blame the ECHR, but leaving the ECHR won't fix the problem. Our judges are are willfully misinterpreting the legislation in some cases, and they will do the same with whatever legislation replaces it. And frankly, another problem with our judges is that they're not the best and brightest. The best lawyers are making way too much money to consider becoming a mere judge. A Supreme Court justice earns less than a junior partner at a mid-tier city firm, and a High Court judge's salary wouldn't cover a month's billings for a star KC. In 2023, the Ministry of Justice said that 40% of High Court vacancies went unfilled, partly because senior lawyers balked at the pay cut. Our asylum system is designed for a radically different time, before the advent of cheap travel and social media that broadcasts an idealised image of life in Britain around the world. And even if our asylum system worked as it was supposed to, it's essentially a system for bringing failed, violent medieval cultures into successful societies, which isn't going to be good for the host culture. When Britain inevitably divides along sectarian lines and balkanises and descends into civil war, where will British people claim asylum? We're told the far right are exploiting this situation to garner support, but if existing parties won't do what people want, people will vote for parties who will. That's how democracy is supposed to work. If anybody wants to stop the rise of the supposed far right, then they would do well to follow the example of Denmark, which is a centrist government that listened to its people's wishes and greatly restricted asylum, approving just 800 claims last year. As a result, the supposed far right don't get a look in at elections. Starmer says he'll control British borders, but in reality, he knows that once these people are settled in the country and voting, they tend to vote left wing. And also the social upheaval and discord created by the influx of new cultures means that he can bring through ever more punishing laws to control people's speech and basically make it illegal to be right wing. So while Starmer will make noises about controlling the borders, the next 5 years will see ever higher levels of immigration. So how do we fix it? Well, I've got some ideas. Just let women in. Men are supposed to stay and fight in wars. Why are the people coming across in small boats and claiming asylum overwhelmingly male? Also, we need to bar people who come here illegally. If people know that they're never going to be able to become British citizens if they come here illegally, they're going to come through safe and proper routes. And we should bar safe countries. If we take all the people who are victims of prejudice in these places, who's going to stay and change the attitudes in these places? We also need to cap legal fees and cap legal appeals. And we shouldn't give welfare to anyone not born in Britain. And the judiciary needs to change so we elect judges like they do in America to ensure that judges do what people want, not what weird communists who hate Britain want. And if the argument for allowing people in is that people need safety and need jobs, we need to remilitarise Britain and take over failed states to help them develop economically and provide safe, stable societies for their populations. Because what we're doing at the moment, instead of helping people, risks destroying democracy and prosperity in Britain. Anyway, thanks for listening. If you want to buy me a beer, there are links below. And if you want to support me making these videos, you can become a patron to get access to exclusive content and stuff. It's sort of like having a Disney Plus subscription, but with much worse production values. But I won't try and turn your kids into genderqueer communists. Anyway, thanks for listening. Bye. Bye bye.